So today we're going to be talking about my top 4 conferring methods that I recommend that any literacy teacher or coach should start off with. I know there's so many types of conferences and small groups that you can choose, and it can be overwhelming at times trying to figure out, should I use this one? Should I use this one? Should I learn about this one next? So I'm going to share with you my top 4 methods that I recommend that if you are newer to conferring, or even if you're not and you want to learn some new methods, these are the 4 that I recommend that you start with. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can get into this. All right. Here we go. My top 4 methods to start with if you are newer to conferring and even if you're not. All right. So here are the top 4. Number 1, a compliment conference. Number 2, coaching conference. Number 3, research compliment teach conference. And then number 4, strategy groups. So these are the top 4 methods that I recommend that you start off with. And there's a reason why, which I'm going to go into that. But let me know in the comments, how many of these are you already using? And which ones have you not dabbled into yet and you really, really want to know more about? So let me know in the comments below. And so I'm going to go into why I chose these 4, why I recommend these 4, and some reasons as well. So let's talk about what is a compliment conference, because that was the first one that I recommend that you start off with. And honestly, it's the first one that I started off with when I started learning different types of conferences. So a compliment conference is when you reinforce strategies students are already using by offering helpful praise, or in other words, the compliment. So that is what a compliment conference is. Now, why start with a compliment conference? So let's get into that. I have 3 reasons why. Number 1, it is the quickest type of conference you can use with students. So if you are looking for a way to meet all your students, this would be a top conference that you'll want to use because it's so quick and you can touch and meet with a lot of students this way. I like to use compliment conferences at the beginning of the year to really get to know my students, maybe before I launch a new unit, things like that. But a compliment conference is so quick and you really are able to touch a lot of students. So that's my first reason why I recommend starting with the compliment conference. The second reason is most conferring methods that you're going to learn or have learned, they have a compliment component to it. So if you get really, really good at giving your students that helpful praise or those compliments, then you're going to be really good at some new conferring methods that you might learn along the way, especially that compliment part of that method. So that's another reason why I recommend starting out with compliment conferences, because once you start using more methods of teaching, most of them have a compliment component to it. All right, number 3, it is a great way to build positive relationships with students and build up their confidence as readers or writers. That's why I said before, I like to start off with these, especially at the beginning of the year or before I launch a new unit, because I really can build them up, get them excited about what's to come, and share with them, hey, these are all the things you already know how to do, or these are some things that you've been showing that you're getting stronger and stronger at, and I'm so proud of you. So it's just a great way to build those positive relationships, and don't we want that, right? All right, so let's get into that second method, which was the coaching conference. This is the second one that I recommend that you learn. And a coaching conference is when you come prepared with a strategy to teach or reteach and offer strategy-focused feedback and support as your students practice. Coaching conferences is so important because during that conference, you can offer that strategy-focused feedback while they're doing that guided practice. So why start with a coaching conference? So a coaching conference, here's number 1. You can give your undivided attention to the student and work to provide that feedback to one student at a time. it's really helpful, especially when you're getting started with these conferring methods, is that if you can get really good at giving that feedback to one student, it's going to be a whole lot easier to give feedback to 2, 3, or 4 students in a group. So that's one reason why I say start off with those coaching conferences. Number 2, it's really effective way, or it's really effective with readers and writers who need extra support, because the whole structure of that conference is all about coaching in and giving that feedback and helping them, supporting them every step of the way, jumping in when you need to, but then also you kind of jumping out as well, so they have time to practice a strategy independently too. So that's another thing. If your students need extra support in a certain goal or a certain skill, coaching conferences is great for that. All right, number 3, you can work your way up to using strategy groups, because guess what? It has the same structure. So that's another reason why I recommend starting out with coaching conferences, because once you get good at doing a coaching in a one-on-one conference, then it's going to be a whole lot easier when you're ready to do those groups. All right, so the third conference in my top 4 is the Research, Decide, Teach conference. And this is when you research or assess before deciding what to teach. Then you offer the student a strategy to practice that builds off of a strength. So why start with Research, Decide, Teach conferences or Research, Complement, Teach? I've heard it both ways. Why start with this? So number 1, it is so similar to the coaching conference structure. The big difference is that you don't know what you're going to teach ahead of time. Okay. So in a coaching conference, you know what you're going to teach before you start the conference. But in a Research, Decide, Teach conference or a Research, Complement, Teach conference, you don't know yet what you're going to teach. And that's the whole part of the whole purpose of research, is to find that out. So that is really the big difference between a coaching conference and a Research, Complement, Teach. They're so similar. And that's another reason why I kind of put those together as ones that you should learn. So the second reason is Research, Complement, Teach conferences, they hold students accountable because you're sending the message that you're expecting them to use a strategy between your meetings. So when you're not meeting with them, the expectation is you're going to continue to practice and use these strategies. And so this type of conference structure really helps to keep them accountable. And number 3, students can advocate for what they need, and then they can reflect on their own work. And they can voice what's going well, but then they also can ask for help when needed. And that's another reason why I love the Research, Complement, Teach structure. Did you hear what I said? Research, Complement, Teach. So that type of structure, it has a complement component to it, which goes back to my top 1 with the complement conference. That's the reason why I recommend getting really good at giving compliments, because like in this Research, Complement, Teach, you're going to need to deliver a compliment in this structure. So that goes back to what I was saying before. All right, the fourth and final one in my top 4 is, what is a strategy group? So strategy groups is my next one that I recommend. And here's what it is. When you offer explicit teaching, this is when you can offer explicit teaching to a group of 2 to 4 students. I recommend 2 to 4 students. Probably when you're starting out, you might want to start with 2. Get really good at giving feedback with 2, then 3, then 4, okay? But when you offer explicit teaching to a group of 2 to 4 students, you introduce the strategy and then you explain, or you might model, you offer that guided practice time, and then you, of course, follow up with some coaching and feedback. So that is what a strategy group is. So why start with strategy groups? Well, number 1, once you know the coaching conference structure, like that was my top, I think it was my top 2. The second one, once you know the coaching conference structure, strategy groups is going to be a whole lot easier, because it is literally the same structure. The only difference is instead of coaching into 1, now you're coaching into 2, 3, or 4. Number 2, now there's no more repeating yourself over and over again or doing the same lesson with 3 students separately, because now you have a step-by-step structure to teach them all at once. That's why I love strategy groups. And then number 3, you can use your notes that you take during those strategy groups or during your one-on-one conferences, things like that. But you can use your notes to notice trends in the class so that you can pull meaningful small groups. All right. So those are my top 4 conferring methods. And I recommend that you start off with, whether you're newer to conferring. Let me know in the comments. Are you newer to conferring? Are you just starting this journey and starting to learn some new conferring methods? Or maybe you've been doing this for a while and you just want to learn some new methods and add them to your toolbox. Let me know in the comments where you're at in your conferring journey. Have you already been using compliment conferences, coaching conferences, research complement teach conferences, or strategy groups? Let me know how they're going. And also, you can let me know maybe one of the challenges you're having with any one of those 4 as well. But those are the top 4 that I recommend that you start off with when you're either newer to conferring or maybe you've been on this journey for a little bit and just want some new methods. All right.